I'm
8
gonna
hours
try.
would be.
Can we cover all of this in 8 hours? I don't know.
Maybe.
All right, everyone got their water and everything? Good to go?
Mhm.
Excellent. Because we go live in 3, 2, 1. All right, this is Dark Knees Radio, episode number 81, The Fey Covenant. I'm, of course, one of your hosts, Mike, and tonight I'm joined by Chris. How's it going, Chris?
Hey, yeah, it's pretty good. I've got some gaming planned for this weekend, so yeah, I'm in good spirits.
Very good, very good. And we've also got Chig. What's up, Chig?
Oh, not too much, Mike. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm really excited for this episode where we're going to be covering both Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition and Secrets of the Covenants for Vampire the Requiem. Very exciting episode. And yeah, let's just kind of get into a quick little gaming update here right off the bat. I have actually ended my D&D 5th edition game. Two of my friends who are hosting us for our games actually just moved to Australia. So we had to wrap that up quick, and we did so decently. Didn't really get to cover all the story I wanted to, but hit the major points, and they kind of figured out what was going on towards the end. So very happy with that, and I'm glad to have finished up a pretty cool 5th edition campaign. And how about the two of you? Chris, you mentioned you got some gaming lined up. What's been going on?
Let's think. So tomorrow I am running at the friendly local gaming store some Shadow War, so Warhammer 40,000 Shadow War, which
Ooh,
is basically Necromunda. So that's kind of a bit of a demo for that. I'm also going to take along my Gorkamorka gangs, so I can do an intro to that because essentially it's the same rule system. And then, so the idea was to try and get as much kind of like sci-fi skirmish kind of gaming going on. So I think someone will be running some demos of Infinity. And let's see, what else have I been doing? What else have I been doing? Obviously, let's not forget, we had UK Games Expo a couple of weeks back, which was really, really good. So we've got some contacts lined up for some interviews. We put out some episodes for that, like the interview with Chris from Modiphius. So like, there's some cool new games coming out, like or already out that I want to look at, like Tales from the Loop. That looks really sweet. Let's think, what other gaming has been going on? Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the board game, I picked up from Expo, and it's really great. It is basically Eldritch horror, but it doesn't take freaking ages to play. And I am planning for a... let's see, what am I planning for? So I'm painting, I've already painted half of them, my Tzeentch warband for Age of Sigmar skirmish, because, like, fuck, I'm collecting an entire army. But the Tzeentch acolytes from board game are really good. And let's think, what else is going on that's related to that. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I am planning. Yeah. So that's in 2 weeks' time, and I've taken liberal inspiration from things like The Witch and Brotherhood of the Wolf, just really for like the look and tone of it, and some of the old adventures. So one in particular that's quite good is Sing for Your Supper. It's just completely batshit crazy, that Warhammer Fantasy adventure. And then, obviously, the setting is there's a city on the border to Sylvania in the Warhammer world, between the Empire and the region that is Sylvania, called Essen. Called Essen, of all German town names to be, it's Essen, which apparently is the most haunted city in the old world, in the Empire. So the characters will start out there, and they're being sent off on a mission because of numerous things that have occurred recently, and just literally about 2-3, no, maybe 4 days travel from Essen is the now damned city of Mordheim. So I'm setting it literally a few months after the meteorite struck Mordheim and turned it into a shattered shell of a city.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I actually read through your adventure thus far, and it seems like a pretty exciting time. So, yeah, good luck with it.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, that and just painting tons of stuff and playing War Machine Hordes. Chick, what are you doing gaming-wise?
What I'm doing gaming-wise is not much, sadly. Yeah, my local gaming group has had to cancel 3 of the last 4 sessions due to either holidays or family in town or, grown-up garbage that we have going on in our lives. It's pretty sad. We are someday going to get back to a 5th edition D&D game, though. So got that to look forward to.
All right, very good. Very
It's been
good.
pretty fun.
Yeah, is your Torg game done? Is that all over?
Oh yeah, the Torg game wrapped up. We then played a 2-session game of Savage World Rifts, which somehow managed to be fun despite being a less than my favorite system and a less than my favorite setting. But when you put those 2 together, they worked out better than either their component parts. So good job, designers of Savage Rifts.
All right, excellent. Cool. So I think that's it for the intro, and let's just jump on over into some White Wolf news. Okay, so quite a bit has been going on, and we're going to kind of just tackle this up front. Some of the feedback that's been coming out of the new Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, V5 playtest, the pre-alpha material that's come out thus far. So we got this a couple weeks ago, and just first off, looking at the rules, very interesting. The hunger dice mechanics are pretty interesting and very novel. So that's kind of an exciting thing to check out. And some of the other system changes that they've included, such as removing botches, putting in compulsions, and all of that is very interesting from the rules perspective. However, there's been quite a bit of controversy about the adventure and one of the characters that was included in the V5 pre-alpha. So just kind of tackling this up front, one character, player character, is named Amelina, and she is a Ventrue with the feed restriction that she can only feed off of children. And many people have reviewed this content, looked at the character, and they're not happy with it. It's basically it's a pedophile character that you can't really get around it anyway. And people don't like that they are being asked to play this character, and there's really no other options unless you only have 3 players in the game. Then you can just take this one out. And another aspect of this whole play test is that we were asked to not change around any of the characters or introduce any new content or rules. You just play it as is. And people are definitely not happy with that. So just to kind of jump into, I guess, my own opinion, and then we can kind of discuss this a little bit. This is a horror game that we are playing here. So these sorts of things, these very difficult subjects and even sometimes offensive things could come up at your table if everyone is comfortable with it, comfortable exploring it. And specifically, if you want to explore pedophilia in your games at your table, that's fine as long as all of your players are consenting and they're okay with it. Personally, I've been talking to you guys about maybe running the play test, and if I were to do so, this character is definitely out. I just don't have any interest with having like a recording or my name associated with this sort of a character and that sort of a role-playing experience, in public or even really in private. So that's kind of my opinion just on the subject matter. Now, should this have been included in a playtest as a mandatory character with part of the story revolving around them? I don't really think so. It's not good for many groups, and it's just not content that they really want to explore.
Yeah. So I'll jump in on my opinion on this. So I think, again, you're right. What you do at your own table is what you do at your own table, because you have a contract, a social contract with your players. Everyone agrees on what the chronicle is that you're running, what the story is that you're running, what the content of the game will entail, what things you won't bring into the game, and thus what players can create as their characters. So if that's all said and done, then how grim dark you want to go is up to you personally. Now, I know from, well, having run Vampire the Requiem, I'll be honest, my wife's character for Vampire the Requiem has done some heinous shit, let's be honest. But that is by agreement at the table of, we all understand this is not a nice character. We are not doing, we're not treating it like a fairground. The horrible kind of trauma and just disgusting, vile acts. We're not kind of just using it as just for lols. Telling a story about a horrible person because you know that there will be consequences, and I think that's important. Is characters like these have to have consequences in some shape or form at the end. So I don't think the character is wrong to be explored. I just think that given this is the first window into Vampire 5th Edition, it's too hard, too fast. It as one of the mandatory characters there that to be played, as the way they wrote this character has to be played for this playtest. It's just like, I get what they're trying to do, which is to present these are horrible characters which ultimately get their comeuppance at the end of the adventure. It's just too much. Spoiler alerts, indeed. Yeah, I mean, fine, but it's. I think spoiler alerts are mostly not needed anymore on this, but it's just too much too fast. If they wanted to include it in there, my initial opinion was there needed to be options. There should have been more scenes. Like, if you wanted that type of character, that to explore a character that does horrible things, you can look at variants of it and leave it up to the players at the table, the GM at the table, to pick. Because players can imagine things far more horrible than any shit we can ever write for adventures. Trust me. Like yep. from running. I'll go back to, because it's always a classic adventure to work that out. Terrible Tale of James Magnus is suggestive of the sexual undertone of the relationship between the ghosts in that story. But you don't need to explicitly describe in gritty little minutiae in the flashbacks what the ghosts are projecting into the characters' heads. You don't need to do that. You only need to say one or two words very subtly, and the players will fill in the blanks for you. That is classic Hitchcock. And the players will even come to conclusions that you had never even thought of and weren't even in the story to begin with. Like, the last time I ran it, the players came out of that game thinking James Magnus is a people trafficker. And I was like, I can see the conclusion of where it comes from and how they got there, but it's not written that he is that. I certainly did not say he is that, but I can see where they were thinking and how they got there, and that's a perfectly fine conclusion. And I'm glad the players came up with that, because that shows that they're willing to go, that's what he is, subject, because we have brought that subject to the table ourselves. So I think they needed more options for the Amelina character, or a variant, or so you can have extra scenes. Like, you can chop and change, because it is our only window into the game right now. Everyone wants to play it, meaning if everyone wants to try it out, a good portion are going to go, is this really what Vampire 5th Edition's about? Because otherwise, I don't want to know. So yeah, that's my opinions on it. I do have some opinions on the framing of the character, though. So in the descriptions of Amelina, the first things we learn about her is that she likes feeding on young vampires. By that, they mean, my reading of that, my interpretation is recently embraced. Because the Ventry feeding restriction doesn't restrict doesn't influence a restriction on the type of vampires they can feed on. So but the way they wrote that, and the way they wrote about how she feels on feeding on young vampires, about the vitality and life that it gives her and so forth, and they brought up the sexual undertone of that as well, that frames the rest of her feeding. And given previous material in the Vampire the Masquerade books from every edition, that then influences how you interpret her feeding on children and young people in general. Because you then go, well, she's sexual in that way. Is it sexual for her in the way she feeds on these children? The text for the character does not say one way or the other. It just says she feeds on them. It doesn't say. So we're having to take our interpretation of what the kiss is and how vampires feed and the influence it has on the victims, on the person being fed from. It colors that already. So I can see how that can lead us to go that her feeding on children is, has that issue. But if they were more exact and precise in their language, and I like to say this, more verbose in their language and less conversational. I think the way that some things just don't be conversational how you talk about it. Be precise and exact. Say what you mean, because then there is no room for misinterpretation. She could easily have been presented in numerous ways that she is either feeding as if she is the lion that chases after the antelope calf, feeds on the young, the weak. But the way it's a distinct difference in how she treats her two methods of feeding. One is for pleasure, one is completely as an animalistic predator. Or they could have gone another route, which is they could have presented her as being motherly to the children. That she approaches and she does that kind of like she's that perversion and inversion of the relationship between a mother and child.
Yeah, so
you could have done that.
Yeah, very dark and very interesting way to take that sort of character.
And let's be honest here, guys. That would have been a more interesting character than, oh, she's just a pedophile.
Yeah, and that's also, it gives you a way to contrast her two mechanisms of feeding, because you can then see that her feeding on young vampires who are still filled with a remnant of their humanity and their vitality. It means that for her, then, her feeding on vampires is an escape from her curse of feeding on particular mortals. So you can then better understand why she does look for young vampires, because it's an escape from the only way she has to feed on mortals. But we didn't get that. We didn't get that in the text. That is something that the writers at White Wolf need to learn, is that they need to be, in some places, conversational text is fine. Other places where you start delving into mature content and you do want to present characters, be exact, be precise, and we can then misinterpret. Well, no, we don't have to misinterpret it, but we know exactly what they're saying and the intent is there. And then we don't get into this whole issue of, oh, everyone at White Wolf so clearly edgelords. Like, those questions outright.
Yeah, certainly. Looking at the playtest material, the technical writing of the rules section, there's two different PDFs. You have the rules and you have the adventure. The rules section is pretty clear overall, and it's very easy to read through, get all the information you need. But the adventure itself, yes, really has that conversational tone. One thing I was complaining to you earlier, Chris, was that they use like shit and fuck as a lot of their adjectives, and we have a very nice English language here. We should try to be using a lot more, variety in adjectives in the language. It's just not as detailed and intelligent as I'm used to seeing from a lot of the more recent World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness material. But yes, Chig, do you have any strong opinions on this or differing insights?
Oh no, you guys have covered it very well. I agree with you completely. The character should be, if not completely redone, then removed from the playtest. Sorry for groups who have more than 4 members. I guess.
Yeah. White Wolf did on their official blog put out a blog post kind of talking about the playtest a little bit, some of the feedback they got, and kind of just talking about giving an FAQ basically about different aspects. Specifically, they did talk about Amelina, and they said that in their opinion, she is not a pedophile. I don't really agree with that. We actually did contact White Wolf for some clarification on that, and they got back to us and kind of explained their stance. Still not sure I agree with it. I think what they really should have done with that blog post, though, is actually just kind of say, like, oh, hey, we understand that this character isn't right for every group, and then just give an additional extra character. Somebody who's completely different, exploring some different aspects of the vampiric condition. Maybe one that
could same character and change the feeding restriction, change the reasoning. If their line is, we don't see this as pedophilia, we see it as X, then you could change that to say, and you can also change it so that X is represented by feeding on A, B, and C instead of children.
And that feeds into what I was saying about the difference of how this character sees feeding in different ways. And that was actually in part of their response to us was, something they did say is that, the character could have been written with alternate feeding restrictions that worked out in the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Specifically, they said maybe feeding on the elderly, which was an idea of yours, which is both horrible and kind of interesting, which was a vampire that has an old folks home, has a nursing home.
Guys, can you just pause for a second because someone's at my front door?
Sure.
No problem.
Yeah, I've read the email they sent us. I was trying to lead us into that email.
I know, that's why we're going to talk about this. Because I actually have some strong opinions on that character and how it could be really interesting. And I'm going to kind of just be like, hey, okay, let's...
It could be way
talk
more
about this a little
interesting than it is.
Yeah, could be. Should I restart that statement and be like... Wait, I remember what I was saying. I don't know.
You're saying stuff and words.
Yeah, I was just kind of rambling.
Mostly when I'm not the one talking, I'm not listening to you guys. So I don't know what you said.
What?
What? Huh?
What?
I'm teasing. I'm joking.
Okay. All right, good. Oh my God, it's sweltering in this apartment. I'm gonna drink some water.
Yeah, sweltering 85 degrees. How do you live?
Oh my gosh, the humidity.
Shh, don't talk about him. He's back.
Right, sorry. Where were we then?
Did you not want to buy Girl Scout cookies?
No, someone asking whether I'd parked in their parking space, apparently, but I don't have a car. So...
I don't have a car, yeah.
Yeah. Right, anyway.
So I was making a
point. Yeah.
Yeah, I was making a point to Chig about. Okay, so Chig, it's actually kind of interesting. You know, that email that we got. Martin actually was talking about a character, alternate feeding restriction of feeding on the elderly, which is something that you had actually talked about as being an alternative for this character. Do you want to kind of like jump into that a little bit, just because it's
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
They the character has an orphanage or an orphanarium or whatever, and their charges, or they're not the people who are on paper running it, but they run it, they have it. So their charges are basically their herd, to use older edition terminology. So they go in, they drain the kids in the night, and they leave. So yay.
Mm-hmm.
Super gross, but hey, there you go. So my suggestion was, well, if you want to, have a character whose feeding restriction is they feed on, the overlooked and the sick, then have someone who owns an assisted living facility for, the elderly.
Yes. Yeah.
That way, I mean, it goes back to what Chris was saying earlier about, the predator on the savannah who picks off the sick and the old. And it adds a lot of, sadness to the game.
Yes.
These people that are put away and forgotten by society, by their families. On top of, all of that, they've had in theory rich full lives, but now they're tossed aside, they're forgotten, and they're food for a monster.
Yeah. The other thing, the other idea I had is you could look at is it the Morbus bloodline from Requiem? They're only able to feed on people that are ill with some sort of disease or infection. So again, you could easily have this character, given my own personal, unfortunate personal events in my life recently, but you could clearly see this character feed on, it could be a home for the terminally ill. And in that, again, completely changes the dynamic of this character. Like, yeah, they're not old or young, but they are sick, terminally sick.
Sure, someone who owns a hospice.
Exactly. And it changes, like, some people go, no, this character, other characters, the other player characters go, no, you're still a monster. You're feeding on people that have no ability to defend themselves and have no choice in it. But at the same time, I mean, you can't deny that maybe the Amelina character is very selective on exactly who she's feeding on, because she picks people who, she can help in her own way, or at least it helps justify her feeding, and that feeds back into her why she feeds on young vampires. Then that dichotomy of feeding on young vampires versus feeding on the terminally ill is more pronounced. You have dead people who are living versus people who are living who are the closest thing to dying. But yeah, I mean, the response we got in the email was they should have had more options. And that's what we said. Have more options. I mean, this is your first time presenting this game system. They went too grimdark too fast.
Yeah, certainly.
That's my new film, Too Grimdark, Too Fast, starring Vin Diesel as Horus and The Rock as yeah. Okay. Did we want to cover the other issue with the playtest, which was a use of terminology?
I think we kind of need to.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, Chris, you want to cover that?
Okay. So one of the compulsions for the Bruja character is, so Mike, compulsions are basically how the character acts in response to having their hunger, their frenzy being triggered, isn't it?
Yeah, specifically their hunger triggering.
Yeah. So one of the compulsions reads as triggered. That's the label it's been given, and the character, and then the description is that the character reacts in is outraged and disgusted or some such, and acts in a violent manner towards that source. The problem with that is, and why a good portion of people disliked it, is that triggered as a term in when we get into subjects of, I guess, social justice and a lot of stuff going on in gaming circles these days, triggered is far too loaded a term. Personally, the accepted psychological definition of triggered, which means something in your past which has in some way mentally and psychologically scarred you, that memory by something in the modern day is brought back to you. Thus, you are triggered and you have a flashback to those feelings. It's all to do with post-traumatic stress. So that obviously has implications to people and how they react to things around them, and if it brings back memories of something bad that happened to them, whether it's war, whether it's due to someone dying, that they knew, like it's a horrific accident, or stuff like that's happened to them, such as unfortunately things like rape and other acts committed against them.
Abuse in general.
Now, unfortunately, triggered as a word has also been perverted in a way when people go, well, I'm triggered by this. And it's like, well, so to me, there's a very definite usage of the word. And that triggered is different to, I feel uncomfortable about this. Triggered has to me, is more than just feeling uncomfortable about this topic. It's like you feel, you have a post-traumatic stress disorder reaction to this thing, not it seems in bad taste. There's a clear line, and because of that confusion, that misuse of the word triggered as a term, that's where we get the problems of the way that trigger gets used in a derogatory manner by people that feel kind of like Gamergate, red pill communities, and so forth. So we wanted clarity, essentially, from White Wolf about why they use this term. And we did get a response, didn't we, Mike?
Yep, we did. And essentially they were just saying, okay, we just felt that we're using trigger in the same form as kind of like setting off, or that's sort of a usage. And specifically, they quoted this Neil Gaiman article or essay that he wrote a while ago about a similar sort of psychological triggering, which again is not like the traditional psychology definition. And I actually remember when that article came out, and a lot of people weren't happy with it. So I can see again why people are not really psyched about that term overall. But I mean, White Wolf was extremely clear to us that they were not using it in any sort of like Gamergate red pill manner. In fact, specifically, they say we don't support those people and they're awful. Which, it's good thing to clarify. So that's kind of the case. I'm pretty sure, based on what we've heard from some of the V5 designers, that the triggered term is just going to go away. It's just going to be replaced by something else. So that really probably won't be an issue. And that's pretty much where we left things.
I think a lot of these issues, I think we'll see. I think this might actually be, again, we're going to get some of these things occur a few times, I think, with the use of language, because White Wolf is now a European company. It is staffed by people from countries such as Sweden, from Spain, from other parts of Europe, and from the US. Some of the freelance writers are also going to come from other places. So given this is the first material that came out that comes from, we have to admit, from someone that is not a native English speaker, not a native English writer, I would say, to be fair, there are going to be missteps due to the use of language because of social and cultural differences. Okay, just in how they feel a word is used when they use English versus how native English speakers use it generally. And it's just going to happen. I mean, Wolf has never been perfect in dealing with other countries in the past when it was an American company with predominantly American writers writing about countries and places they've never been to ever in their lives. So I think we just have to accept that. And sometimes I think the thing is just to accept that if there is a misstep, reach out for clarity. And I feel like we've met Martin in person, and I feel from the response we've got as well. Sometimes you can chalk these things up to just it's just a stupid mistake, and they should it just needed an extra pass by some other readers to go really, and it's like, did you really mean that? And then it can be shipped out. I know they're wanting to get a quick turnaround on playtesting. And they want to basically get people excited and drum up support, but I just need to be a bit more careful, really. And with the blog post, I feel like with the blog post, it's just like sometimes all you really do need to say is, "Yeah, we made a mistake, a really stupid mistake. Sorry." You don't need to say actually much more than that. Sometimes trying to explain things a bit more can actually lead you down the route of sounding like you're doubling down on things. Mm-hmm. So that's my final conclusion on it all. People are free to disagree with me. Yeah.
Yep, sure. All right, cool. So I think that wraps that up. So we can go on and talk about Onyx Path and some of the great stuff they're doing over there.
Yay.
And so we haven't had a show that was not recorded at like World of Darkness Berlin or following that, or at some convention in a while. So quite a bit has come out from Onyx Path. And yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff. We've got 1,000 Years of Night, which is a Vampire the Requiem Elders book. Chris, you're our resident Requiem expert. Are you pretty psyched for this?
Yes, I'm hoping this will be kind of, because I've not delved into it yet. So I'm expecting content that's a bit similar to Gilded Cage and Council of Provision from Masquerade that came out right at the tail end, which to me always kind of read like Requiem books anyway. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good read. Yeah. We'll get into other stuff later. What else we got coming out? Changeling, the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Anthology. So that's is that a book of stories?
It's a book of short stories, as a matter of fact. It is in my to-read pile, but it is the fourth thing down because I am behind. But yes. Based on the authors' names, it looks really nice. So I'm looking forward to getting to it.
Okay, cool.
Sweet.
And then what have we got for... We've got something for Exalted. Okay.
Yeah, I just put it in there. Tomb of Dreams came out, which is the Exalted Jumpstart. So if you want to check out Exalted and not have to read a 700-page book with like 350 pages of charms and magical spells, this is a great place to start.
The wrong game, because that is Exalted, my friends.
That is true.
That's so true.
but yes, this is much more accessible, and people seem to be really excited about it. So I figured I'd just kind of point people in that direction in case they want to check out Exalted 3rd edition.
Cool. Okay. What's the other thing we've got here? Vampire: The Dark Ages 20th Anniversary Companion. Okay, what's the companion meant to contain?
I have no idea, but I do know that it was developed by Matthew Dawkins, who's a very good writer and a great developer. So there's definitely some cool stuff there to check out for Dark Ages. And in addition to that, we also have the Dark Eras Companion, which came out at pretty much the same time. And that gives us a bunch more rules and alternative settings for Chronicles of Darkness in different timelines and different game settings. So that's a really cool one.
So wait, do you really not know what's in the Dark Ages Companion?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. It's got some setting material for different cities in the world, like Rome and Mogadishu and places like that that are not, standard D20 Vampire Dark Age. I'm sorry, not D20, V20 Vampire Dark Ages settings, because you don't really have any information. Well, you have some, but not really on setting a campaign in Rome or Mogadishu or Constantinople. I guess to get a source book previously.
That's actually really cool because I would love to have I'd love to have a look at that because extra information, because that book then combined with how we did the Vampire the Dark Ages primer series, I think. And we finish off with how you could actually use all that information to run Requiem in the Dark Ages. So that kind of information for like Rome would be perfect for also for Requiem for that, or really any of the Chronicles of Darkness games if you want to do historical stuff. So it just sounds like a good book for everyone, not just.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. There's more to it than just the setting information.
Yeah.
There's also obviously plot hooks and stuff like that, new mysteries that will never actually resolve. There is a guide to domain building and how to treat your servants, things like how to hire servants, what to do with them, what the difference is between a head of the household and a major domo and stuff like that. And finally, super exciting, a study on Dark Ages warfare.
Oh, cool.
So if you really wanted to have a Dark Ages huge battle, then you can figure out how that was actually done.
Sweet. Mass combat rules. Nice.
I was going to say, tangentially to Dark Era's companion for Chronicles of Darkness, the Kickstarter's coming up soon for Dark Era's 2. So that is another book of Dark Era, time period settings for Chronicles of Darkness. So seems like everyone just wants historical settings for every game going currently.
I mean, there's a lot of cool ideas out there, so it's pretty great that they're exploring all of them. And in addition to that, we've also gotten a new Werewolf the Apocalypse novel, which is Song of Unmaking by Bill Bridges. He previously wrote 2 other werewolf novels, and they're pretty sweet. So if you want more of that stuff, there you go.
Cool.
And finally, just kind of wrapping things up, By Night Studios has made some pretty cool announcements. They have a giant LARP event coming up in Tampa Bay, which is Tampa by Night. And it's going to be at the end of September, beginning of October. So that's definitely something to check out. And in addition to that, they will be coming out with a new Changeling the Dreaming Mind's Eye Theater LARP rules. It's supposed to be kind of a companion book, so you can just use the rules in either their werewolf or their vampire material, those rule books, and just kind of play changing characters in those venues. So pretty cool stuff.
I will buy it because I'm a completist.
All right, good. Well, Chig, you're going to need to buy either vampire or werewolf to get the full rules.
No. I would have to buy either vampire or werewolf if I ever planned on playing it. I will purchase it so that I can continue to say I own every Changeling the Dreaming book.
Okay, very good, very good.
I have the 2 original LARP books. I've never LARPed, but I could.
Yo, there was someone that was running The Shining Host at World of Darkness Berlin. He apparently had something like a 35-person LARP there.
I'm not surprised. It was always very, very popular.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Probably the second most popular after Vampire.
Interesting.
At least from what I was given to understand from my contact with the filthy LARP community.
Whoa.
Which I say with love.
Oh, okay. All right. It was an endearing adjective. All right, awesome. So I think that wraps up the kind of news segment here. And let's jump on over to a very exciting One World of Darkness segment. Whoosh. Whee! All right, Chick, you've been waiting 22 years for this day.
Man,
it's here.
Finally here.
It's finally here. An awesome, playable, epic version of Changing the Dreaming. Hit me with it. Hit me with your opinions, Chig.
It is the best Changeling the Dreaming book that has ever been written, or possibly ever will be written. I couldn't say for sure. But yeah, I am a wholehearted fan of this this version of Changeling. The 20th anniversary edition is a masterpiece.
Indeed. And it has quite a lengthy list of authors. Specifically, it was developed by Black Hat Matt McFarland, but in the list of authors, we've seen a lot of cool returning writers, such as Jackie Quesada, Nikki Ria. And it's just a really epic, interesting, and well put together book. And I'm pretty psyched to dig into it here. So, Chig, what's new? What's new about this book?
Well, a lot of things. The meta plot has been updated. The rules have been updated. The kiths have been updated. The courts, the magic system, glamour and banality, everything that was old is new again in Changeling the Dreaming.
So, I mean, this is very interesting because when the 20th anniversary stuff first came out, and Chris, you probably remember this, like when V20 came out, they didn't change a lot. A lot of the text was just, grabbed from Revised Edition, and it might have been massaged a little bit. And there were a lot of rules that didn't even get changed, like merits and flaws were just copy pasted overall. But this seems to be I wouldn't say a divergence, but a large improvement overall, a new iteration on Changeling, and not as much of a copy paste to the past.
Well, now there's a very, very strong reason for that. Changeling never got a revised edition, never. So every other World of Darkness game that I can think of, maybe not Wraith. Did Wraith get a revised edition?
Nope.
Okay. Well, maybe Wraith 20 when it comes out will be just as equally Nido Mosquito.
I mean, it'll be awesome, but I don't think it's going to change too much. But maybe we'll see.
But yeah, Changeling never got beyond second edition. So the rules changes and everything that happened to all the other game lines between second edition and third edition never happened in Changeling. The meta plot didn't really have much to advance beyond any other second edition game. There were revised era books put out for Changeling the Dreaming that advanced the story a couple of years, but they were very few and far between. So yeah, Changeling 20th is very much a different game than Changeling Second, but I don't know if it's more different than Vampire 20 is from Vampire Second.
Okay, yeah, I believe that.
So where do we want to begin?
I mean, I guess it'd be good to talk about the meta plot first, because that's what shows up first in the book.
That's true. So yeah, the meta plot has moved both forward in time, as one would expect, since it's 20 years after the first book came out, but it's also moved back in time because I know, right? Because the origins of the Fae were always kind of murky and left a little bit clouded, and they were the children of the Tuatha. But what did that really mean? We'll get to that someday. Well, someday has finally come. And because it was a game book developed by Black Hat Matt, and he, for some reason, loves my least favorite version of the Changelings, the Dark Ages Fae, he has managed to successfully backdoor Dark Ages Fae into Changeling the Dreaming.
Ooh, I mean,
it is. If I could take a moment, it is the worst part of Changeling the Dreaming 20th edition because it really doesn't fit. They are very, very different games.
They are.
They're. It's apples and oranges. But you know what? Whatever. It's hinted in a number of places that no, that was for real where we came from. But it's also Changeling, so whatever. I don't believe it. That's not how it happened in my game.
Okay, good. So we can move on from there and jump into the rest of the meta plot, right?
We can. The meta plot has moved past the mid-1990s, which is good because we have also moved past the mid-1990s. Music is good again. Yay.
Yeah.
So there are maybe 3 paragraphs that cover basically the entirety of the war in Concordia, the disappearance of King David, all the plot threads that were left dangling at the end of the previous Changeling books, and it can basically be summed up as, meh, some stuff happened. Also,
Okay.
some bad guys came back. That was neat. They're jerks. We don't like them. Then it gets to some more modern day information, introduces the idea that, hey, maybe glamour is getting even harder to come by than we thought it was going to be. So we're going to introduce some austerity, which is a fun little nod to modern real world politics. Except austerity isn't really fun, but, you know, it provides conflict in a game, and, you know, stories are about conflict and all that. So, hey, there you go.
Yep.
So in addition to that, it mentions that in the backstory in 1969, when man landed on the moon, of course, the gates to Arcadia were thrown open and the Sidhe came back, which worked out mostly okay-ish for a game that was published in, 1995, because at that point, 1969 was, what, 26 years before?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Now we're pushing 50 years ago. So if you have a character who did not exist on the planet until 50 years ago, by now they're old. Even if, they stayed in a magical, time-free land of the changelings, like a freehold where time doesn't pass if you're a changeling or a mortal who's been enchanted, then they're still 50 years old. And nobody, let's be honest here, very few people want to play a character who is 50 years old in a standard modern day game. Maybe if you're playing an elf, but you're not playing an elf because this isn't D&D. So, in addition to the 1969 moon landing, there have been other glimmers which have allowed the Fae to keep coming back from Arcadia for whatever reason. It's still left unclear as to why they were, either expelled or decided to come back. Including, but not limited to, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which is 20 years closer. The ending of apartheid, which is a date that I should have looked up before recording this, but I don't recall. I think it was 1990, I want to say 2. Look that up, guys. It's fun. And the election of U.S. President Barack Obama. And no, for real, that is listed as one of the official hopeful coming together of the world dreaming things that change reality enough to allow Sidhe to return.
Okay, I can see it.
It was 94. The date we're looking for, Jake.
I was off by 2 years. I feel okay with that. In the history of humanity, 2 years isn't that much. Thank you for looking that up. In addition, though not given a capitalized name like Glimmers, which allowed the Sidhe to return, the Door to the Dreaming swings both ways, and 9/11 allowed the Tholane and other dark kin, ancient foes of the Changeling and children of the Fomori, to return to the world. So this came as a surprise to me because the Tholane were introduced in the Shadow Court, which was a book that came out well in advance of 2001. But okay, sure, why not? I'll allow it.
Yeah, I guess.
And let's see some other changes. While still very much a game, at least in this book, focused on the Western world, which is, primarily America, United States thereof, and not other parts of America. There is a huge section of the first part of the book that goes around the globe and touches on the rest of the world, which, to be fair, is something that Changeling tried to do in the past, but as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, did not do very well.
Yeah, I mean, I read through the section, and when it says it goes around the world, it goes around the English-speaking world mostly. like there's the Africa section, which is like maybe a quarter of a page and just talks about Ethiopia and Sudan. And I don't even think the author read the Wikipedia page. I'm not sure. That might have actually been something that just pulled in from a previous edition, previous source book, but
I don't believe they ever spoke about Ethiopia or the Sudan, including in the Kithbook issue before.
yeah.
Aside from saying, "Hey, the Oba are here," but yeah, the entire continent of South America gets exactly one paragraph, and it says, "Hey, we don't really know what's going on here. Go check it out if you're interested." So if you want to set your story down in South America, hey, good luck. It's a blank canvas. Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I said before. They tried previously, and it was just notably bad whenever they left North America. The source book that covered the United Kingdom is just laughably awful. But,
Okay, carry on. Explain.
Amuse
me.
I don't believe that anybody who wrote that source book had ever actually left, say, Atlanta, Georgia in their life. They may have left the downtown area, but they definitely had never ever been overseas. It's very much a pip pip cheerio kind of thing, with also, hey, there's some Celts out there because hey, they liked changelings or they liked fairies, right? Yeah, it's just not good, man. it's yeah. If you want to read a copy, I would be happy to send you one, but I mean, you really don't want to read a copy. It's not good. Yeah. It's called Isle of the Mighty, if you're that interested. And it covers England and Scotland and Wales.
Yeah, I can I can already imagine what kind of quaint kind of views they have of the locals and what we do. And it'll be very interesting to read and contrast it to, say, I don't know, Shadows of the UK for New World of Darkness when that came out.
I think you absolutely should. It came out 20 years ago in 1997, so yeah, it right. is not the highest quality.
Anyway, carrying on.
So yeah, they did update the setting. They updated the meta plot. There's a lot going on in the world. The Parliament of Dreams that was suspended at the end of the previous game line is back in session, which is great. It kind of moves the inherent conflict away from commoner versus noble into a more kind of a not a cold war, but a shadow war between the Kithane, the changelings, the creatures of the dreaming, and the now returned Darkkin, and the creatures of the Thalane, the creatures of the Fomorians. So there's conflict. There's still, it's changeling, so there's still politics. There's still haughty nobles and uppity, lower class commoners. But there's a lot to chew on there. A lot of meat.
Yep, sounds pretty good. And talking of meat, there's some pretty meaty new rules. And Chick, as you noted here in the notes, the big thing, of course, is that your seeming is no longer tied to your physical age. So, for example, you can have a childling that's in the body of a very old person. So you can have that kind of individual that seems old, but actually has a childlike wonder in many ways.
Right.
And you can have grumps who are, in young bodies, and they're just like, ugh, I'm a cranky 12-year-old.
Yeah, I mean it's more tied to your personality and how you interact with the world rather than, oh, you're younger than 12. Congratulations, you're a childling. In a year when you turn 13, you're going to get a ton of banality. Sucks to be you. Enjoy it while you can. It also, which, kind of takes away from the creepiness of the game a little bit. Because not to linger too heavily on the whole pedophilia thing that we touched on earlier with the 5th edition vampire playtest, it was really difficult sometimes to justify why you had one grump who was hanging around with a bunch of one older guy, older in the previous versions being 35 and up, which makes me very, very old now, hanging out with some prepubescent children that were not related to him, going on adventures. I mean, it didn't highlight it in previous editions, but it was there, and it was kind of creepy. So,
Okay, good they fixed that.
They've totally eliminated that. So, good job, writers. I appreciate it. In addition, they've added some new rules for seemings. There's not one that is inherently better than others, which was the case with childlings in previous editions. Much like in 2nd edition Werewolf, if you wanted to have 5 in all your power stats, you could totally do that by choosing the right auspice and breed and tribe. So Childling used to make you way more powerful than Grump in previous editions. Now it's a flat +1 to either glamour or willpower, or you can choose if you're the middle seeming wilder, which is fun.
Cool.
In addition, seemings now also include banality triggers, which describe unique ways unto your seeming in which you are affected by and gain banality, which is, for everybody who's ever played Changeling knows, the weight of the world destroying your fey soul. So if, for instance, you are playing a childling, no matter if you're a 9-year-old or a 90-year-old, if you try to avoid a new idea or a new experience, then you will gain banality, because part of being a childling is looking at the world with eyes of wonder, and trying new things is part of that. And if you say, no, I'm not going to try something new, then you are denying that very essential part of your being. And by denying yourself, you're inviting in banality.
Interesting. I like it, Chig. I like it. So let's move on over to the Kiths, because they've expanded quite a bit from the previous editions and the previous core books. We have all the yeah. So I mean, in the original core book, it was just the Boggans, the Eshu Knockers, Puka, Redcaps, Satyrs, the Shi of many different stripes, the Slua, is that how you pronounce that one?
Slua, yes.
Yep, and the Trolls, of course. But now you've included many, many more, right?
Oh yeah. Most of them are returning from other books. The Cluricans, the Piskies, the Selkies were all in supplements for 1st and 2nd edition. They've been brought back. In addition, they have added the Gilly-Doo, which are the weird little plant guys from the aforementioned British Isles sourcebook. The Merfolk, the Oba, the River Hags, and for the first time in English, the Corrid from the French source book, and the Morganid, which is a different kind of mermaid, from the German source book.
Sweet.
They've also added 2 brand new ones, the Wicktail and the Wolpertingers, which never existed before. They're just new versions of new splats you can play, which is awesome, because the game needs to, grow and expand. They've all the Kiths from all the books and all the new ones have well, the new ones haven't been cleaned up, but the ones that appeared in previous versions have been cleaned up, especially the ones from the old supplements. For instance, Cluricans now have a single frailty. They like collecting things rather than a weird mishmash handful collection of them, which they had in previous editions, where they were alcoholics who liked to dress in earth tones and also, I believe, enjoyed collecting things. They had 3 kind of frailties, but not one specific one. Other things that have been cleaned up, the Naka flaw is mechanical in nature. So while the Knockers, who were the craftsmen, the mad inventors of the Kithane, have always had a flaw that they could not create anything perfect. Everything that they made had, at least, no matter how well they rolled on their crafting roll, had a flaw. Unfortunately, the clarification is not, in my opinion, great, because they've made it a mechanical flaw now. And by mechanical, I mean game mechanics. So anytime you use a Knocker invention in a stressful situation, it has a 1 in 10 chance of breaking down. Which, okay, sure. That was always more of a, flavor or color thing in previous editions. But now let's say that, you have a Knocker who works for the local baron and is in charge of building his, fleet of robotic horses or whatever to bring the She Knights into battle on. Every time they fight, there's 10% of his cavalry goes down.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem.
It's a needless addition, in my opinion. But whatever, you can take it or you can leave it. Just say that, no matter how well they create something, there's always a flaw.
Yeah.
The horse mechanism that he created for the local duke farts occasionally when it's least advantageous to do so. Something like that. Something fun. Not just 10% of the time it just breaks. Because that's boring.
Yeah, I can see that.
On the plus side, the Puka frailty which is Puka Lai, is now something that's actually playable. In previous editions, it was just stated Puka can't tell the truth unless they roll a willpower roll against difficulty 8.
Yeah. So most people just play them as like it's opposite day. So
exactly, and it became so tiring. That was never the idea, the point behind they don't tell the truth. And the Kith book covered this fairly well. However, I think they only ever published maybe 6 copies of that Kith book because it was super hard to find. So a lot of people never got to see it. So yeah, Puka don't tell the whole truth. Puka embellish the truth. It's not Puka say the opposite of what they mean. They don't say yes when they mean no, because that, again, is boring. And that's not what Changeling is about. Okay, we're going to get to the list. And on the downside, the Satyr birthright, it's kind of rapey, you guys. I know it specifically says it's not rapey, but it's kind of rapey.
Right, okay. Is it Cthulhu Tech levels?
I don't think it's quite that bad. No. So the Satyr are the dreams of passion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever they're around, people are having a good time. They're the life of the party. I mean, they're also... their passions can be things like, I'm very passionate about studying, or I'm very passionate about the music that I play, stuff like that. It very much says it's not always about sex.
But everyone played it about sex.
Well, not only did everybody played about sex, but one of their birthrights it's called Gift of Pan. And when a satyr indulges herself in one of her passions, often sexual, but also artistic and creative, those around her also caught up in the frenzy.
Oh, okay.
Fae and mortal alike join her in dancing and debauchery. Now it goes on to say in the very next sentence, the gift of Pan doesn't force anyone to partake in sex or any other activity, but removes inhibitions that might normally keep someone from indulging. So it's not going to force you to want to join in the orgy, but it's going to make it so that you don't necessarily not want to.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of rapey.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Please tell me I'm wrong, but it seems
I mean,
kind of rapey.
it's I'm just gonna chalk that up to gray area. And harkening back to our earlier discussion, just make sure everyone at your table is okay with it, whatever you're doing, before you go and do stuff. Good, good. All right, moving on.
Now I want to point out that they're not tying seeming to age really helps in this particular birthright. Because in previous editions, you could have childlings who had this on their character sheet, and that is a super double dip of not good.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, okay.
Yeah. But it's still, I mean, it's still there, guys. It's still there. It's still not great.
So Chig, what about the Selkies? So
I'm glad you asked.
their frailty was that they have like a seal on their skin that if it's removed, they're destroyed basically.
Well, the Selkies, kind of. You're sort of there. The Selkies were another kith that was introduced in one of the supplements, one of the first 3 supplements, I believe. They were not a core book kith previously. Their frailty is that they have a seal skin coat, and if they put it on, they can change. They can what's the word I'm looking for here? They are shapeshifters. Good lord. And they are really, they turn into seals, just like the old stories. Yay! So that has kind of fallen away. It doesn't say that they actually become seals anymore, which is good because there's Puka. Those are the animal guys that change shape. But they are still very pretty and very charismatic, and no, they do still change shape. It just wasn't listed specifically as a power. Anyway, yeah, so they have the skin, and it's just a skinned seal's skin that they wear. And if it is just, and their frailty is, if they lose their seal skin, it can be destroyed, which kills them. So other kiss frailties are like, I like to party too hard, or I like to steal things, or I can't ever tell the truth, or I have to help people when they have needs. The Selkies' frailty is, you can steal my coat and that might kill me. Their frailty is they can die, which is boring.
Yeah, it doesn't add a whole lot.
And also, it's really hard to destroy their skin. So it's boring and difficult to do.
Yeah, it's a much better like NPC kind of frailty than for a player character. It doesn't really add to the role playing at all. It just kind of creates this one specific situation where there is only one outcome, which is, well, 2 outcomes. Either they live or they die. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, they either get it back and, hey, yay, good job, and they can shapeshift again, or they don't get it back and they're killed. Which, might make for a fun story once, but only once. If it keeps happening, then either your storyteller is out of ideas for what to do with you, or it never happens except for once, and you basically don't have a frailty. So I don't know what the solution here is, aside from give them something that isn't quite so lame.
Yep, pretty much.
So moving on. The Shi have been split in twain, which is kind of nice. When the Shi left the Autumn World back at the Sundering, some of them didn't go. This has always been the case, but there's never really been an explanation in game for what that meant. So in the past, all Shi were very good looking. They you couldn't use magic to make them look like idiots or humiliate them. You couldn't magic a cream pie into their face. And they were doubly affected by banality because they were recently returned from Arcadia and they didn't have centuries of exposure basically built up to survive in the modern banal world. They were hit doubly hard by banality. That makes sense for the Shi who left, but there was never rules for what you did if you were playing a Shi who stayed behind. Well, now they have the Arcadian Shi rather, who play by the same rules that have always existed, and they also have the Autumn Shi, which are, and again, here's a little inconsistency. It's noted that House Skaithik and Liam are the two houses that stayed behind, but it also says that every house had at least a few who stayed behind or just didn't manage to escape on time or whatever. And it contradicts itself a couple of times, both in the Kith list and then later in the house list. But again, that's a minor editing error. I'm sure they'll fix that in post. Mm-hmm. So the Autumn Shi, the ones who stayed behind, are still super, super ridiculously good looking. You still can't use magic to make them look like idiots. And they have their own frailty, which is super fun. It's called Adoration. And because they are so good looking and because they have more experience dealing with mortals, they can accidentally get stalkers. So anytime an Arcadian Shi has a meaningful interaction with a mortal, which is described as successful use of intimidation, expression, leadership, etc., the storyteller rolls against a mortal's willpower against a difficulty equal to the Shi's glamour rating. So how glamorous you are makes it more difficult for them to avoid. Failure means that the mortal takes an extra interest in the character, which could be anything from, you're at the checkout line and you talk to you give a rousing speech to the gal checking out your groceries and she gives you a 10% discount or whatever, to, oh yeah, that guy's a super creep and he begins stalking you and taking pictures of you and he becomes obsessed with you and he loves you, and why do you not understand that only he can love you? So that'll add some story stuff to the game.
Yep, certainly. And of course, so back in the appendix, there's the new kiths and subkiths. You have like the Oba and the River Hags. Those are pretty cool. And really, this book is just filthy with different character options. There's so many of them. And in fact, they also gave us some really cool kith creation rules. And they're okay. It's nothing like too complex, but it gives you some very nice suggestions for how to make your own kiths, including how to balance the affinities and the frailties. And it's pretty cool because they actually give you this nice example of how to create the Domovoi of Slavic mythology. So you know what? There's even an extra bonus kith right there that you can use.
Indeed. And it's a brand new one too.
Yep.
And it's not bad. The rules are okay. They're nothing super crazy, but I'm not sure if they're really necessary, especially in this book, given that it has like 150 or something different splats already included. But
Chick, the people wanted it, and they've got it. So here we go.
It was promised ages ago that they were going to produce them at some point, and congratulations, they have finally done so. So they are good rules. I don't know that I will ever use them, but there they are.
Yep.
And I need to pause right now because my boss is calling.
Uh-oh.
So
Okay.
give me just a moment.
Yep. Well, in that case, I can just talk about the courts a little bit. We, of course, still have the Seelie, and they are really just still hidebound monsters. And, of course, the Unseelie oppose them. And they really still, in many ways, represent the downtrodden heroes. Different houses don't really reflect this, but the codes do. So that's pretty much what you need to check out before you kind of jump into these two monolithic organizations, if you will. All 13 she houses are in the book, and they have their new updated boons and flaws. So that's pretty great. And there's also some pretty good information on why they were exiled to Arcadia in the first place, and various factions and societies within each house. Of course, the Shadow Court is back. Those being the kind of darker fae related to the Thalane, and they've been participating a lot more in changeling politics. And they actually have learned quite a few things from the Occupy movement, Black Lives Matter, and even the Arab Spring, figuring out ways to disrupt she rule as they kind of step out into the light to make their appearance. And yeah, this is a bad thing because, as Chig mentioned earlier, the Shadow Court is really controlled in a lot of ways by the Thalane, the Darkkin, that came out of that evanescence, which occurred in the metaplot related to the increase in terrorist attacks and that sort of thing. So very neat stuff. And I think we'll have to stop there then and wait for Chig.
Sorry, what I missed?
Oh, I just went over the courts for you while you stepped away, so we can move on to Magic.
We can move on to Magic. So, wow, Magic is so much better now, you guys. First off, it still uses the Arts and Realms system, which a lot of people have a lot of problems with, but a lot of those problems have been fixed. So first, they expanded the list of arts in the core book from 6 up to 18. Some of those arts, like Chronos and Metamorphosis, are from previous books and should probably have always been in a core book, but were thought of later. So hey, here they are. Congratulations. Some of them are brand spanking new. There are 4 seasonal arts: autumn, spring, summer, and winter. And there's a whole art about contracts and making compacts with fae and other mortals, and swearing magical oaths and things that have always been part of the game, but have not been part of the Magic system, and things that they stole, for instance, from Dark Ages fae. So hey, I said earlier I didn't like Dark Ages fae. I like that they stole some of these things from Dark Ages fae. In addition, Dragon's Ire is an art now. In previous editions, Dragon's Ire was totally there. You might have missed it because it got a paragraph and a half or two, but it's no longer just the not capital A art of fighting so well that you make glamour. It is for real a combat art with damage dealing cantrips and blow shit up us and stuff like that. So that's nice. It's nice that it's included as a more prominent section of the book, because previously one previous complaint was there's only one combat cantrip, which was never true. But hey, look, now there's a whole art just for combat. Congratulations. In addition, the crappier arts like Infusion have been completely removed. They are not in this book. They do not exist, which is good because they were horrible. Also, the Contempt art, which was a Shadow Court art that was literally just anti-sovereign, no longer exists, which is also good because it was also garbage. Contrary to previous versions, the realms the realms are still the realms, so they've been cleaned up and clarified. So it doesn't include things like, you know, things on the wrong lists. Basically, in a previous edition, one of the examples for prop was a rock, which should have fallen under nature. So they cleaned that up. The examples actually make sense. But also, if you want to cast a cantrip and you do not have the realm you need to cast it on, hey, you still can. It's just going to cost you some more glamour, which is awesome.
That's a huge fix.
It makes the system far more flexible than it had been in previous editions, which is good because Changeling is a game about creativity. It doesn't need to be so locked down as it has been.
Yeah, certainly. And really the great thing about the updated, changing 20th rules is that it's not very unfamiliar. It's still the same basic steps to, use a cantrip, picking your art, picking your different realms. And now if you don't have them, you spend some extra glamour, make your dice pool, choose your bunks. And you're also, your difficulty is affected by, say, banality in your target or the place you're in. And, difficulty adjusted by the bunks, and then you roll away and you're good to go. So it's very familiar to previous players, but there's a lot more examples certainly here in the book, and it's just much more clear, but as you said, also more open than it has been in previous editions, which is really just great for players overall.
Absolutely. And in addition, above and beyond that, they introduced a whole brand new kind of Fey magic, Unleashing, which again is something that they stole from Dark Ages Fey. So hey, good job, Dark Ages Fey. Steal more cool stuff like this, less crummy stuff like the backstory. So Unleashing is if you have an art, but you just want something to happen, and you don't have, for instance, you don't have the Dragon's Ire combat art, as mentioned previously. You have, say, Spring, or Contract, or something crazy like that, or Wayfair, and you just say, I want something bad to happen to that guy. I'm going to use my Wayfair art, and I'm going to unleash on him. Then the new system just says, okay, great, whatever you're going to do, you follow this new system that we made up, and if you succeed in your role, whatever you wanted to happen will happen. There will be some negative effects on you. You will get some nightmare dice, which existed in previous editions, but like Dragon's Ire previously, were kind of downplayed, hidden toward the back of the book, not mentioned very often, and you might go a little crazy, which is fantastic. Again, it allows for flexibility and randomness, and not wacky randomness. And I love it. I just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's definitely a cool change, and it really kind of fits a lot of ways in some other media we've seen. That's really a Changeling, where these individuals that will use that untapped and sort of wild creativity to get things done. But again, it's quite dangerous, and a lot of it's up to really what the storyteller wants to do and how they interpret what might occur.
Sure, exactly. And like I was saying earlier, say you don't have the combat art, you have Wayfair, and you want to hurt this guy who's attacking your friend, you just unleash Wayfair, and the Dreaming slams him into a wall, because that's moving him, which is what Wayfair does. It moves things. So it moves him very, very swiftly into a wall, and he's knocked out, and your friend is now safe. So rather than using the pre-written steps of a cantrip, the pre-woven magic, it just, like it says on the tin, it unleashes the raw primal essence of the Dreaming, which is fantastic, and something the system has needed for a while. Maybe about 20 years, give or take. So in addition to all of that, each art has a section that on what happens if you unleash it. each cantrip within an art, each discrete level of the arts, tells you what your realms do, which is usually, but not always, the realm you choose is the target, which is fantastic because in previous editions you had cantrips that said that, as written, required a certain level of a realm to use. If you wanted to summon fire, you should have had nature 5, which is, pure untouched. I'm sorry, nature 1, which is pure untouched raw elemental form. If you didn't have nature 1 and you took that cantrip, you were basically boned. You couldn't use it as written. Now, if you don't have nature 1 and you want to summon fire or water or whatever, hey, great. The realm you use is what you're summoning it on. So if you have Fey 1, you can summon a rain shower or a bucket's worth of water onto your buddy over there, which I'm sure is what they always intended. But little clarifications like that really help. In addition, each art discusses what bunks for that art might look like. In previous editions, bunks have been just the most random, ridiculous garbage. First edition Changeling actually had a random deck of cards that you drew your bunk from. So it often had absolutely nothing to do with the effect you were going for. So if you wanted your Shi character to use the sovereign art to make the commoners behave in a more dignified fashion, well, you drew your bunk card and it said you had to eat, shove 6 donuts in your mouth at once, which is the antithesis of dignity and decorum that you were going for. But that's what the card said you had to do, so that's what you had to do. No longer the case. Also, Primal is no longer the you win art. In previous editions, the level 4 cantrip of Primal, Heather Balm or Holly Strike, lets you deal aggravated damage or heal damage. That's been split up. It's now 2 separate cantrips in 2 separate arts. So good for them for splitting up the ridiculousness. Now that being said, aside from the Pyretics art, which lets you create fire, I did not see in the book anywhere that let changelings do aggravated damage using their arts. This includes the art that lets you strike people and things with lightning, actual, for real, honest to Thor lightning from the sky. Yeah, only deals lethal damage.
Really? That's not consistent with... There's still rules for electrical damage in here?
There are still rules for electrical damage in there, which say that it deals aggravated damage.
Yeah, so whoops.
Again, I'm thinking maybe that's just an editing issue that they'll get to before they publish it. This is the pre-release version, still accepting, editing suggestions.
Yeah, definitely. And
despite those flaws, the arts and realms and magic section is leagues ahead of where it was.
Yeah, certainly. And there's a lot of other rules in here. We're kind of running out of time, so we can't really go through all the extra kiths and their different magic rules that they have, but there's rules for the Dwantane, Thalanes, Darkin, Yunahi, pretty much everything that's ever shown up in a Changeling sourcebook, and there have been a lot, are all included in here. So this is really, in many ways, a very, very complete sourcebook.
It really, really, truly is.
I think, Chig, what we really need to end on is probably one of the most critical issues for Changeling Dreaming, and that's the revised presentation of both glamour and banality.
Absolutely. It's all in previous editions, depending on the author and the edition, what was glamorous and what was banal changed from book to book, sometimes from chapter to chapter within a book. In this version, which I completely agree with and think it should always have been, it becomes much more personal. What is glamorous? Okay, I'll give you an example. In previous editions, glamour was creativity, glamour was wonder and magic. But in previous editions, also science and school were banal because you can't be creative in the scientific fields. You can't find wonder in anything that happens at school, which, you know, again, these were second edition games, and in second edition games, science equals bad was there across all the different World of Darkness games.
Yeah.
Glad
they changed that.
They have moved so far beyond that. I am so very excited. Like I said, they're far more personal now, and you can have a character who is a boggin who deals with social interaction, who gains glamour from going to a city council meeting and interacting with his fellow citizens and the democratic process or whatever, that would be just banal as can be to a Puka who gains excuse me, who gains glamour from going out and dealing with nature and the wilderness. So it's very much a more personal thing. Specific types of places are no longer inherently banal. In previous editions, like I said, science equals bad. So every lab everywhere in the world was banal as can be. If you went into a scientific research facility, you were basically signing your own death certificate.
Literally just listening to this podcast, Chris will make Changelings banal in second edition.
Absolutely. Because
he's an academic and a scientist. You're just draining the creativity from them.
He's going to suck them dry. But Chris...
And trust me, science labs are not banal. Like,
exactly.
You know, they are like, you know, to the outsider, watching... I'll give context, to give good context. If you were an outsider looking at what some of the PhD students did in the lab, I mean in the actual lab in my research group, what they do, that could look incredibly boring. Like they're just taking powders of minerals and grinding them together and grinding them together and still grinding them together and then cooking them in an oven. But actually, they could, by sheer perseverance and creativity, find the next generation super, amazing capacitor that makes, sixth generation mobile phone technology. And that opens up massive amounts of creativity in science in general. But to a particular person, that looks boring as shit. And to me, that's not even my science, what I do every day. I look at that and go, wow, that's great, guys. You just did shake and bake. But they look at what I do, which is on a computer, coding and picking through lines of bloody Fortran code. I go, that looks completely boring. You're sat in front of a computer. But I'm like, look, I understand the mechanistic manner in which atoms move. That explains why the shit you make in the lab works. And that means we can design the next generation thing so that you're not just having to waste time. You can make it in a really direct manner. And then to everyone outside that, that all looks boring as shit. So I like this new personal take on it. And yeah, you're right. Second edition, science equals bad is such a...
Would you say that is a banal worldview?
It's a very banal worldview. The writers back then had a very banal view of a very postmodern banal view of everything we were doing. Because look at it now, we have so much great science and technology, and we're pushing science to the very bleeding edge and finding some weird shit. So yeah, that's such a great change.
Even in first edition, when science equals bad, the resurgence, the thing that gave so much glamour to the world that the Sidhe could return from Arcadia, was a scientific achievement. It was man walking on the moon. So it's always been there.
Yeah.
They were just not paying attention to it. They were looking at it backwards. And now they've moved past that. So it's like I said, it's a much more personal thing. It'll be more difficult for individual storytellers and players maybe than going down a list of, are you doing science, you gain banality. But I think in the end, it's not necessarily bad. In fact, it is good. It will be very rewarding.
Yes.
That being said, canonically, some places are banal. If there is an office building where everybody goes in and they do things that they hate for no good reason all day, they just enter numbers into a computer and they act like robots.
The Department of Motor Vehicles. I mean, we can all agree that is the worst place ever.
You know, for me, it's not my cup of tea, but I guarantee you that, okay, the DMV, look at The Simpsons. Patty and Selma, who work at the DMV and take delight in tormenting the people who go into the DMV, those are some red caps.
Right.
They are loving the frustration they cause. They are gaining glamour from these people who have to trudge through their line and, oh, you checked this box wrong. You have to go to the back of that much longer line. They are loving it. So personally, I would house rule that places individually do not have banality ratings, but that's just me.
Rules okay, I'm sold. I'm sold, Chig.
So, supernaturals, other prodigals as they are called, are no longer inherently banal. Just because you're a vampire and you don't change doesn't mean that you are going to kill me if I talk to you for a couple hours, which is nice. If you want to have a crossover game, I suppose. They have individual banality ratings just like anybody else, just like me or you or whatever. So that's nice. That's a branching out of things. That being said, some things are still definitely banal for everybody. If you destroy something that is of the dreaming, then that is always a banal act. If you deny your true nature, that is always a banal act. Some things are just, if you break an oath, that is always a banal act. Things like that. Things that go against the very nature of the dreaming or creativity in general, which makes sense. It does, however, make war very difficult for the Sidhe, because if you kill it, or for the changelings, because if you kill another Fae, you get a point of banality. Although I think Wilders get exempt from that, because they are just they're the murder hoboist of all the seemings, apparently.
Okay. Nice. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for Changeling 20. I mean, we only kind of touched the surface and went over a lot of the broad basic things, but there's a lot in here to dig through. It's almost maybe over 500 pages. It's very long. There's a lot going on.
400 and I want to say 75 pages. So
yeah, 480 is the end of the special thanks at the end. So
where I am.
Yep. Nice. So yeah, it's great. It's probably it's definitely the best edition of Changeling in my opinion, and certainly the edition that has most inspired me to really dig into this game further and maybe run it myself. So
I am definitely, once we wrap up our 5th edition game, going to convince my group to play Changeling.
Nice.
Even though one of the guys absolutely despises World of Darkness, I will talk him into it.
All right, good, Chig. All right, cool. So I think that's it, right?
That is it for now.
And let's move on over to the secret frequency. Whoosh.
Hey guys, while we're moving on over, I did get called into work, so I kind of have to go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool. We will, Chris, let's just finish this up quick because this is getting pretty lengthy.
Sorry, I'm a chatty guy.
No, it's quite all right. You're understandably very excited about this Changeling book.
Get it all down. Get it down. Make it nice. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
All right, Chris. All right, let's do this. For months, the city of Vancouver has been terrorized. Vancouverites are no longer safe. He can find you in your home, in your school, or even your workplace. His name is Canuck the Crow, and his mischief knows no bounds. The bird was actually rescued and cared for by a Vancouver resident, Sean Bergman, and is instantly recognizable by his neighbors due to the bird's orange ankle bracelet worn on its left leg. Canuck is rather friendly with humans and loves to interact with them, but beginning a few months ago, the bird's actions began to take a more aggressive turn. First came the thefts. Canuck was seen wandering around town stealing supplies. For example, he stole nails from a construction site. Then Canuck flew into a McDonald's, terrorizing the patrons and stealing food. It was only when a woman grabbed the bird that it decided to flee the restaurant. Then, Canuck wandered onto a police crime scene where the police had been just threatened by a kitchen knife. The bird strutted over, picked up the knife with its beak, and brandished it in, I quote, menacing manner. Just this week, mail had to be suspended in several neighborhoods of Vancouver because Canadian Post personnel were being attacked by the bird. Thankfully, mail service just began to resume today. So, yeah, this is just odd. In the real world, this is just, an intelligent, kind of uppity bird. But in the world of darkness, how can we use this idea of Canuck to inspire bizarre happenstance in our games? Of course,
right.
the most direct idea, and this is the easy softball one right here, is that Canuck is actually a Corax were-raven from Werewolf the Apocalypse. He's probably of the corvid breed, so that means that he was born a raven and then turned into a were-raven at maturity. And as a newly shape-shifting animal, they decide to explore the world around them, trying to learn about mankind. But of course, the Corax have a bit of a mischievous streak, so this one happens to be just messing with people. But this can be a very interesting challenge for werewolf packs in the area, or maybe even mages as they learn about this new mischievous kind of problem-causing creature in the area. Another idea, Chris, is that Canuck could be stealing these materials and different items, shiny objects, because it's actually just a bird that's working for gremlins, as presented in the Midnight Road supplement for Chronicles of Darkness.
Okay.
These are very interesting creatures that tend to, they're kind of akin to knockers in Changeling Dreaming, which we were just talking about, where they like to build things, modify contraptions, and can do some pretty terrible things to humans that they catch with their machines. So maybe this animal is just collecting different supplies for a project that the gremlins are undertaking elsewhere in town. And of course, this could be some sort of a spirit. In Werewolf Forsaken, this raven causing its ruckus in the world could actually reflect something far more dire in the spirit world, in the Shadow Beyond the Gauntlet. So, Chris, do you have any ideas for this random, bizarre situation? By the way, it's also Canada Day today. Good thing we're talking about Canuck.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So if we go back, if we start with the one that you ended on, then it could also be one of the host spirits. It could be it could be a physical manifestation of one of the hosts. Because there is in, I think it's Predators, which was first edition. It has crows. It has crow spirits. Well, crow hosts. So
okay.
It could be collecting things because it's gathering bits and pieces that has something to do with bringing more of its kind into our world or whatever. I can't quite remember what those host spirits do, but they've mostly got something weird that they do. And collecting things it is part and parcel of, crows and ravens and magpies. So that kind of fits into their modus operandi. It's just what kind of magical thing is going on. It'd be interesting if this was a creature that was working in some way for the God Machine. So what if it's one of those, I can't remember the term, but the mimetic virus spirit things that the God Machine uses. Again, it's the crow is embodied by one of those things. And again, it's just collecting things, but it may well cause where it's collecting things, it may well cause a vergence of energy similar to a similar to some sort of construct for the God Machine, and it then starts giving off etheric resonance for demons. So it's not actually something that's doing the God Machine any direct benefit, but it acts like one of those infrastructure sites.
What?
It could be a stigmatic, I guess, as well, or cryptid.
One idea, kind of playing off the whole collecting of items. This spirit, let's say it's the spirit, might have to collect specific items and pass them across the gauntlet in a form of exchange to bring over more spirits of its kind. So the interesting thing for, let's say, a group of mages to solve is what items is it collecting? What's the pattern to this? And if they find that out, that will help them capture it or some of its minions as well.
The other thing I like is it could be a creature working for, given it's a crow, a raven, maybe it's working for one of the true fae. Maybe it's working it. So it's collecting things so that the true fae creature, the gentry, can make a fetch to replace someone.
Oh, perfect. Yep.
And that works in with the whole idea of the Wild Hunt, and the Wild Hunt was obviously led by Odin. Odin gave his eye and is related to crows and ravens because they see for him in their mythology. I would also say it could quite easily be a creature working for a vampire through obviously the use of animalism, and has been bloodbound to the level that it works as a form of direct control. Again, the vampire can see through its eyes and it gathers and collects things. So maybe it's stealing post from its rivals on the behalf of the vampire.
Perfect.
That's all it's doing. It's just stealing post.
Yep.
Have I not thought of another game that it could be used? Yeah, go with a cryptid. Yeah, you could do something weird like that. Or it's also, numerous crows are acting like this in an area. It could be some kind of fallout from disquiet due to some Promethean. Or it's kind of like the knock-on effect of some demon, perhaps, maybe in Demon the Fallen, kind of like, the plagues of Egypt kind of thing. You could be going with a smaller level version of that kind of problem, as some Neverborn is about to wake up and he's tied to crows in some way. That's kind of what I would use. I think you could either it's the direct manifestation of the action of some supernatural creature, or it is some forbearance on something about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I like it. Cool. All right, I think that's it for the secret frequency. So let's move on over to Chronicles of Darkness. Whoosh. All right, Chris. So we're going to talk about Secrets of the Covenants, which was developed by Ramblin' Rose Bailey. And it's an interesting book. It's, in some ways, a second edition to the first edition, Vampire the Requiem Covenant source books that came out for, the Carthians, the Invictus, etc. But it's very different because it's more of an in-game artifact, isn't it?
Yeah. I think some of the complaints about the first edition Covenant books is they were quite long, very dry reads. And I can agree with that. I think they are quite long. They're not the type of book you would read page, front to back, page for page.
Yeah.
They're very much to dip in to get ideas to how to construct your covenants in your setting so that you knew how the political infrastructure of your city operates, and whether you've got internal sub-factions. Secrets of the Covenants is not that. In the back, if we talk about the rule, what it presents rules-wise, first of all, it does present updates and new interpretations of certain merits, and also particular powers that are associated with each of the covenants. So obviously we get a new look at Carthian lore. We get brand new Kruak rituals. We get brand new Thaban sorcery. We get some new coils. We get new scales for the Auto Dracal. And I think all of those, the examples there are really great to use. You can never complain about those type of things. I really like the idea of Kruak style. So this is a new merit. So essentially, it's how do you perform your magic, which makes sense for the Circle of Chrome, because their cults could manifest their mythology and ideas through different lenses, whether it's they're more Egyptian themed versus more Wiccan versus something that's maybe based on Shinto. It really depends. So having those as examples means then you can build Kruak styles that fit the regional cult that you've developed, that you're using, and obviously there are then how you then use that with the different Kruak rituals is quite good fun. We also get the Invictus with their oaths. I can't remember when oaths were introduced into Requiem.
I'm not sure either. I don't have the Invictus book. I meant to kind of look that up.
I think they turned up in there. So again, they're kind of like, I think in some respects, the vampiric kind of equivalent to making pledges in Changeling the Lost.
Yeah.
So again, you're getting some benefit, and you're binding that with a ritual and with vitae and the power of that comes with that.
Yeah, the big thing with the notary is that with the oaths is that you need to use a particular character that's a notary. Basically, it's like kind of like a third party to seal the deal effectively.
And that's really cool, because that then reinforces how the Invictus operate compared to the Carthians. The Carthians have as a community that agrees on a certain set of laws, and they all agree on it. And those laws they can essentially invoke responsive manner against their enemies or enforce upon the city. Whereas oaths are more between individual vampires, but it needs to be signed off on someone that has been indoctrinated through the Invictus to the point that they can bind that oath. So I quite like that. That's, like I say, it's kind of like pledges in Changeling. Obviously, as I said, there's updates and merits, but then, of course, we've got all the stories within this book, and that's where kind of I think it's a mixed bag. I've not read all of them, and that's because let's be upfront about things which are more technical issues. Some of the fonts suck balls. They are just really they don't help with reading it. Again, you should only dip into this book for ideas. Don't read it cover to cover. I don't find it a page turner like that. Then the poor choice of fonts can be combined with the poor choice of backgrounds, because they want to make the paper look like it's a real piece of paper, but it can just lead to contrast issues, and again, it just screws with your eyes and you can't read it. I mean, it just doesn't help. So
yeah, this is the same kind of problem that a lot of people used to have with Hunt of the Reckoning source books back in the day. They had all these kind of funky fonts, usually matched up to different creeds and stuff like that. But especially when you put it onto the backgrounds of crumpled paper, that sort of thing, you couldn't read half the words.
So let's talk about my highlights in this. I think for the Lancashire Sanctum section is quite interesting, because it talks about different creeds and how it uses the signature character from the New Orleans book, who is the Prince of the City, and talking about how he's reconciling his interpretation of the beliefs of the Lancashire Sanctum, and how that relates to other things that are going on in the world, and how he's met Solomon Birch from Chicago, and it's got a transcript of Solomon Birch's one of his speeches, one of his sermons. So I kind of like that, and about the kind of different ways that the Lancashire Sanctum kind of manifests. It has like this punk. They talk about a very kind of punk kind of group of well, Christian punk kind of churchgoers, and they have a band, and then there's obviously the more traditional interpretation of the Lancashire Sanctum. With the Ordo Dracal, again, it gets onto some really fun topics. It talks about the possibility of a sixth clan, and about convergent evolution, which I think we're big fans of in Vampire the Requiem, that idea.
Mhm. Yep.
It talks about different kinds of experiments that have been done, and again, I think those in-game kind of artifacts work for that. I think they work quite well because they give you good insight into the diversity of those groups, and the idea that like the Ordo Dracal are made up of different kind of like research groups almost, and the Lancashire Sanctum is made up of different churches that have their own version of the Bible, as it were, or the Testament of Longinus, and how they interpret that. When we get to the other groups, I think the Invictus is okay. Again, it's a little bit laborious talking about how the Invictus embrace certain people, and then they pair them up as kind of an experiment to see what ideology wins out, and if that ideology is then worthwhile incorporating into their methods at that time, so the Invictus can survive in the current time period.
That's pretty
I mean,
neat.
there's some ideas for that, and you can see how you could possibly get some ideas for where you say, well, you're recently embraced as a member of the Invictus. Your sire has tasked you with doing this, because for you to gain full access into the Invictus, you must prove yourself through this challenge. And that could be a very long-term plot line that's played out alongside your more immediate plots that you run in your chronicle. So it just gives your player something else to think about. With the Circle of the Crone, I think there were some essentially it gave you some examples of rituals that are used and how different ideas spread around. But I found that one wasn't kind of as fun to read, that section, and the Carthian chapter for the I didn't find very interesting beyond what I'd already read about the Carthians. And I like the Carthians. I really like the diversity of political systems that the Carthians use, and was presented in their original Covenant book. I just don't think the fluff fiction, the in-game artifacts, really added anything new for me to understand about the Carthians.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like in some ways this book wasn't really written for us, because we're more interested in just like, well, let's dig into the details and kind of get some cool ideas for our game. And this is more, like with the Carthian one, it's just like, yeah, man, I'm going to tell you how this all really is. This is how the world really works. And that sort of thing, which, I've seen that before in World of Darkness books, and it doesn't really give me any new ideas in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was just, I found the Carthian section kind of a bit grating at times. I mean, I understand it did get into little bits where they're I think it was from the perspective of some Carthians based in New York, kind of that whole kind of I can't think of the movement that was there. Oh God, my brain's gone blank. The Occupy movement, it kind of had that kind of trying to evoke that, and they're sampling from different areas, such as like in Texas or in Mexico or Dubai or in I think it was Korea or somewhere like that in that region. There were stories from each of those places and how they were either disturbed or inspired by how the Carthians operated in that area, and essentially we're learning how this group of New York-based Carthians are putting together the laws of their city, like what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. But I still, it just didn't really grab me, because I think there's some bits in the original Carthian book which could have been elaborated on quite a lot. Like the Night Doctors in the original book are such a really interesting little sub faction, which could have made for some good extra stories, like the very, very scientific approach to the kindred condition. But we didn't really get that. It all just read kind of very too much like, yeah, we're the revolution, but saying they are, but it didn't feel like, I didn't really get the sense that what they were doing was revolutionary. It was more saying it, not feeling it.
Yeah, there's a couple of times where I was getting kind of a very tongue-in-cheek vibe about that entire section, but I don't know, it was kind of tough to get through. But leaving that aside, I think in a lot of ways, the real reason why a lot of people would be grabbing this book is because it has a lot of the updated rules for, different, Kruak, Theban sorcery, and of course things like Carthian laws, which is in the appendix chapter. Do we want to kind of just talk over those a little bit and some of the new changes that have been introduced, that sort of thing?
Yeah, if you want, go for it.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think what stood out to me, I don't have any of the first edition books except for the Carthian one. And looking through that, by comparison, the Carthian laws that are introduced here are much more codified as basically merits than in the previous book. The first edition one, it was just kind of like this vague set of rules for if the Carthians control a domain, then they can enact these laws. And now kind of the interesting thing about them is that you don't need to control the domain. And you basically just need to get together a bunch of Carthians, sometimes even a majority of the ones in the domain, to enact these laws, which then affect everyone there, basically everyone in the city. And I found this actually really cool and inspiring because it can really explain how the Carthians can get so fractious, because if they start enacting these laws, then people from other covenants that disagree with these laws, that are affected by them, are going to start trying to influence the Carthians, try to get them to change their mind, break their pacts, break the laws, and reset things from there. So it makes it very interesting for how, while they are their own covenants, you can see how they're being influenced by everyone else in the domain. So I thought that was pretty neat. The oaths are pretty interesting as well. Really, there's a lot of like cool merits in here that I felt were really basically character concepts unto themselves. They're really just very inspiring for developing Vampire the Requiem characters. Things like the court jester, for example, being a Carthian merit for basically being a someone who's a pundit who makes fun of like the prince, for example, and tries to throw them off balance, and it gives them some kind of mechanical feedback from there for how you can play your character. But then other things that are just kind of interesting, like being a forum moderator or like a Facebook moderator in the Invictus. Just kind of like an interesting little concept and side thing, which is just kind of a cool addition to your game.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I really like Carthian law, so having that update is good. I just remembered there's one actually good short story, sorry, from the Circle of Crone section, and it's one of the additions to the setting I really liked. So it talks about the a crone that tends a garden of mandragora, and how that is how she obviously uses people to feed her plants and so forth. Because I really like that idea of how the crone, obviously they're very much into trying to tap back into the cycle of life and death, and so it's just, again, it's kind of creepy. And mandragora, the idea of this like vampiric plant that you can feed from, and it gives you vitae, and it's another source, but the idea that you've got this kind of, you know, I don't know whether you want to call it, whether it's Wiccan or whatever, kind of however you want your vampire to be with their cult, and tending this garden of monstrous flowers. Did they update any of the rules? I know in Requiem 2nd edition there's updated rules on mandragora. So again, just having a short story about that, because it reminds me of I did have a character in my own game who tended a garden of Mandragora. I think of being Crone as well.
Yeah, there's a ritual in here for Mandragoras, or how you can use them. Yeah, Mandragora Gardens. So you can use them to the Mandragoras to perform your Kurak rituals at a distance. So that's kind of neat.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of creepy. It gets you, the plants can be alive. You could just imagine a Crone acolyte planting some of these near in the bushes of their enemies, outside their havens or somewhere like that, to use to be able to use them at a distance. Yeah. So it's a book. I mean, it's only it's 200 odd pages. I would say the last 50 pages is interesting rules, which I quite like, new powers. And as for the short stories, it's hit and miss. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my personal recommendation would just be, I mean, if you're a completionist or something, get the book, whatever. But if you just want the rules, I mean, that's kind of I feel like the main reason to check out this book for the second edition updates. Just wait for it to be on sale, get it on PDF, and yeah, you should be pretty happy with it then.
Yeah, that really covers it. I guess I'm looking forward to hopefully something that's a bit more revelationary in the sense of it tells me something a bit new, and I think that's what the Elders book that we mentioned earlier is going to be. I hope.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Awesome. So I think that's it for this episode. And yeah, we're Darker Days Radio. You can send us an email over at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. And, check out our Facebook, facebook.com/darkerdaysradio. And of course, Twitter, which is @darkerdaysradio.
I don't think there's anything else to say. Oh, we have a new blog. The new blog has been up and running for a couple of weeks now. It's just a fresher look at it. It's been up for a month, I've been told. It's been up for a month. So we'll get some more film reviews on there, and if people have got ideas for other type of content they would like from us, whether that's video or written, please just say, because it's good to do something else other than just recording audio all the time. But that's about it, I think. So any other last words?
Nope, I think that's it. Chris, thank you as usual. Chig had to leave, as people may have noticed, to go to work. But great episode, and everyone, have a good night.
See ya.
Boom. All right, audio's good. And